Helped by Fortune, a Batman All Media Types fanfic, rated for teen and up audiences, with additional tags for Dick Grayson as Robin, Hurt Dick Grayson gets a hug, Harvey Dent is Two-Face, Protective Harvey Dent, Bruce Wayne is Batman, Bruce Wayne tries to be a good parent Bruce Wayne is bad at communicating, threats of rape/non-con, Hurt Comfort, angst and hurt comfort, cuddling and snuggling, tags contain spoilers, animals, Selena Kyle is Catwoman, good parent Selena Kyle, she would be if she and Bruce finally get their shit together for real, protective Selena Kyle, minor Selena Kyle/Bruce Wayne, Bruce Wayne loves Selena Kyle loves Bruce Wayne, they are just being idiots, sharing clothes, Jason Todd is Robin, Jason Todd gets a hug, Tim Drake needs a hug, Tim Drake is Robin, Tim Drake gets a hug, protective Pamela Isley, soft Pamela Isley, lesbian Pamela Isley, fight me on that bitch, Aunt Pamela Isley, fuck yeah, that tag gives me life, hugs, enemy to caretaker, Damian Wayne is Robin, good sibling Damian Wayne, Tim Drake and Damian Wayne are siblings, Edward Nygma is the Riddler, Edward Nygma is crazy smart in this, Pamela Isley loves Harley Quinzel, past Joker/Harley Quinzel, psychiatrist Harley Quinzel loves Pamela Isley, the Rogues Gallery as family, and dysfunctional though. Part 13, and the last part, of the Robin Chronicles. Summary. Looks like we caught ourselves a little birdie, boys. Dick let out a sob and rasped, "No, please, stop." The goons only laughed cruelly, but before they could go any further, a gunshot was heard. "The fuck do you think you rats are doing?" came a voice booming from the alleyway entrance. Two-Face. Shit! Or, 4 times one of the rogues helped a Robin, plus 1 time they helped them back. Chapter 1. Dick and Harvey Dent. Gritting his teeth, Dick punched a goon, knocking him out immediately. Stupid Bruce with his stupid communication skills and his stupid worrying. Why couldn't he see that Dick was more than equipped to do more than a stakeout, or that one patrol route where virtually nothing happened? He was 17, for fuck's sake. It had been 8 whole years since he started this crusade. At this point, Dick had been out longer than some Justice League members, and Bruce still didn't take him seriously. Rain was pouring down, matching his mood perfectly. Dick had snuck out about an hour ago, knowing that B had a business meeting he wouldn't be able to duck out of in time to stop him from patrolling. Suck it, B-man. His comm had been vibrating non-stop for the past half hour, telling him that his mentor was definitely aware of his escapade, and most likely trying to talk him out of it. Dick snorted as he launched a birdarang at another goon, who was now brandishing a gun out of nowhere. That had Dick's mind right back to where he was supposed to be, the fight he was currently stuck in. Bruce, being the controlling bastard he could sometimes be, a stark contrast to the amazing father figure he was otherwise. Not that Dick would tell him that, now with how he was behaving. Would never ever believe him, if he said this had not been how he'd planned for this patrol to go. No, Dick hadn't been looking for fights or trouble. Rather, it had found him. After all, what else should he have done after some random goon shot at him as he swung from one rooftop to the next? Just ignore it? Well, Bruce had taught him to send a message in these cases. Not reacting would have set the narrative that it was okay to do target practice on Robin, and Dick wasn't too keen on that becoming a regular occurrence, so he dropped down and dealt out a few quips mixed with punches. Robin style, as usual. Turned out, he had underestimated the situation a teeny tiny bit. Just slightly. Instead of finding 3 to 5 goons, he found about a dozen of them. Generally, that wouldn't be a mega problem, since the fighting skills would range from bad to mediocre. This time, it was a little different. He noticed very early on. These men had definitely been getting some lessons, making it much harder for Dick to keep track of them, let alone fight them. His heart was racing as he shook another goon off his back before kicking a different one in the shin. They were crowding around him too much, making the hair stand up on the back of his neck. No time to think about that circus night. Come on, Dick, focus. He tried, he really did. But the more he felt them grab his wrist or press them against his sides, the more he saw his parents lying on the ground, with him kneeling beside their bodies, people circling them, crowding him, touching him. Crying out in frustration, Dick kicked a man in the nose, audibly breaking it. A nearby goon grabbed his stretched-out leg, yanking it, causing him to lose his balance with a yelp. Shit. This was so not good. He couldn't do any of his usual tricks and gimmicks because he didn't have enough fucking space. With a hard shove, he was slammed against the brick wall before a man grabbed him by the cape and pushed him to the ground with a hard kick to his ribs. Dick stifled a shout of pain as he tried to weasel out one of his birderangs from his utility belt, only to have 2 other goons grab his hands, laughing. Looks like we caught ourselves a little birdie, boys. Dick swallowed. He wanted to come up with some smart quip, so bad, or do anything that would hint at him being in control of the situation, but instead, his body seemingly shut down. Pinning him down makes him quiet, huh? One man sneered, as he roughly pulled his head up by his hair. Batman taught this little Robin manners, it seems. His blood ran cold. No. He did not like where this was going. Tears filled his eyes as he tried to pull his arms and legs free. He couldn't. Dick should be screaming for help. And yet, somehow his throat was closed up. He was frozen, completely and utterly helpless. He barely heard another man step towards them. Freddy's right. Betsy must have had a reason to put him in these tiny little panties. They do highlight his assets. The man paused, crouching down to look into Dick's teary eyes. And they grant easy access. Your daddy will have to learn to share, little birdie. Because we all want a piece now that we have you in our hands. The smile the creep sent him had Dick reeling. He wanted to object to all the man said so bad, to tell him that B wasn't his dad and that the suit was made with mobility in mind, not what they were grossly implying. Only, when more hands started touching him, did Dick let out a sob and rasp, "No, please, stop." In response, the goons only laughed cruelly. But before they could go any further, a gunshot was heard. Dick flinched as the men surrounding and touching him rushed away, leaving him lying in the dirty alleyway floor, completely soaked thanks to the rain. When he gathered his energy and courage to look up at the newcomer, his blood froze. "The fuck do you think you rats are doing?" Came a voice booming from the alleyway entrance. Two-Face. Shit! Once upon a time, Dick had an Uncle Harvey. Being one of Bruce's closest friends and confidants, he'd helped considerably when Dick first moved in. With his bag of trauma to rival Bruce's, and a lack of perfectly fluent English, B's inexperience with children, distinct troubles with communication, and lack of preparation became apparent within the first few days. That was when Harvey stepped in. If he did so himself, or because someone asked him to, maybe Bruce or Alfred, Dick didn't know. What he did know, though, was that he had gained an uncle. One that would have his back no matter what. He'd gone to all of Dick's parent-teacher conferences with B, and even made time in his very hectic and busy schedule to come to every one of Dick's competitions. Every single gymnastics competition, every single mathlete competition, and every single basketball tournament. He'd gone to them all. Until the accident. After that, Dick had seen Uncle Harvey once in the hospital. And that had been it. He had been robbed of another family member. Anytime B or he saw what had become of Harvey Dent on patrol, Dick would either be sent back to the cave, or go home himself, unwilling to see what had become of the man he'd once looked up to. Bruce himself would deal with the situation, then brood in the cave for hours. Right now, Dick's breath was caught in his throat, his body frozen, as he tried to get up. Two-Face was unpredictable, especially with that coin of his. This could go all ways, much to his dismay. "Boss!" One of the goons stuttered in surprise, before another found his voice and took over. "We caught you a little birdie, boss!" "He's a bendy one." The man wiggled his eyebrows. Two-Face let out a bark of laughter, causing Dick's blood to turn to ice. Suddenly, a gunshot erupted once more, and the man who had just spoken lay in a crumpled heap on the ground with a bullet hole clean through his forehead. It took Dick exactly 5 seconds to realize what the fuck had just happened. Two-Face had shot one of his own men, because he made a remark about him. Shivering, Dick shuffled back a few paces, trying to create as much distance as he could. In the meantime, Two-Face had sneered something at his goons before flipping his coin. "Tails. Seems like it's your lucky day, gentlemen. You get to live." Two-Face, no, Harvey, because this was definitely his way of speaking, stared the men down coldly. "Now, get that pedophile's body, and get rid of it. Let it be a lesson." The goons were frozen, staring at their boss with wide eyes, only practically fleeing the scene once Harvey hissed a hateful "Scram," while letting his hand glide back to the Glock in his suit jacket. "I didn't know Batman let you patrol alone, now, Robin." Harvey spoke, slowly stepping towards him. It was only now that Dick noticed the rain had stopped at some point, since the man in front of him was still completely dry, opposed to his soaking wet self. Harvey surveyed Dick, although it became swiftly clear that it wasn't Harvey the second the man opened his mouth to speak again. "Just get the wet cat." Two-Face growled, before being interrupted by Harvey. "Cat. Get the wet cat out of the rain already." A shiver ran down Dick's spine as he listened and watched the man in front of him argue with himself. It was freaky and terrifying at the same time. Dick must have zoned out. A pretty bad thing to do when encountering a rogue, because the next thing he knew, Two-Face, or Harvey, had draped his suit jacket over his shaking shoulders. Just like before, his eyes started to water, and he really tried to stop it, but he couldn't help the sob that escaped his lips as the adrenaline left his body. "Oh, kid," he heard as he was suddenly picked up from the ground. That was the last straw. Yes, Dick was 17. Yes, he was Robin. But this was the first hug from his uncle in more than half a decade, after a traumatic situation at that. "Shoulda fucking killed those fuckfaces, I'm tellin' ya." Two-Face spat out. Harvey snapped something back, just as Dick buried his face into the man's shoulder. Sobs racked his body as he came to terms with the fact that he had just been saved from a situation that could have ended catastrophically. Bruce was going to hate him now, even more than he sometimes already did. Alfie was going to be so disappointed in him. He didn't even notice Harvey walking around with him until he was gently settled onto a couch. Blinking the tears from his eyes and wiping the snot off his face with his glove, Dick surveyed his surroundings. "This is one of my out-of-order safe houses, right on the corner of Abbey Road with Central." Harvey grimaced, just before Two-Face forcibly spoke up. "You have the calm thing to get the bat here. Ain't got all day." The man in front of him sighed, and Dick only pulled the jacket tighter around his shoulders. "Ignore that." He paused. "Can you get in contact with Bruce?" Dick's eyes narrowed. Harvey knew their identities? How? That was insanely bad. Bruce would be so pissed, and what if it was Dick's fault? Two-Face cut his train of thought off with a rough laugh. "Stop looking like that, Birdie. It wasn't that hard." The man cleared his voice, and Harvey spoke up again. "Not when Bruce was like a brother to me, that is." A faint, sad smile graced his lips. Dick felt himself grow emotional again, and pressed his panic button before doing so, in order to get B to pick him up. Then he once more let himself go, rushing into the arms of the man who had once been his uncle. A man who had, obviously, not told anybody any of their biggest secrets, even while being on opposite sides. As he started to tear up again, Harvey sat down next to him, just like he always would to comfort him, almost as if it hadn't been more than a decade since they'd done this last. Dick crawled into his lap, tucking his head underneath the man's chin. Sniffles combined with his uncle's hand running over the fabric covering Dick was the only thing to be heard, until Dick broke the silence himself. "Why did you leave?" His voice was fragile and quiet. "Why did you leave me?" went unsaid, but not unheard. "Dick." Harvey sighed. "By the time I'd fully come to, able to discern what was him and what was me, it had already been too late. I'd committed too many crimes, killed too many people, cut too many ties to be able to ever come back. I thought it was best to stay away. But I needed you. Bruce needed you. Even Alfie was sad." "I'm sorry, Dick." Their conversation was suddenly cut to an end, as B violently crashed through one of the safe house's windows. Batarangs ready. "Let him go, Dent." Dick reluctantly pulled himself away from the man and went to stand in front of his mentor, the suit jacket still pulled over his shoulders. "Don't be mad at him, B. I fucked up and he saved me." Bruce grunted. "I'm not mad. I'm worried. So is Agent A." His shoulders slumped, and Dick tucked himself into the man's side, seeking comfort, even when he knew a few hours filled with lectures and fussing, and the creation of new safety protocols would be waiting for him back at the cave. "Thank you. It was nothing." The men nodded just before Bruce strode back towards the window, with Dick in tow. As they pulled out their grapples, Dick turned around one last time with a small smile. "Love you, Uncle Harvey. See you soon." And just like he always would, Harvey answered, "Bye, Dickie. Love you too." That night, Dick slept, clutching his uncle's suit jacket, and dreaming of slowly rebuilding a relationship with him. Chapter 2. Jason and Selena Kyle. No. Please stay here, kitty. Jason carefully ran after a small, way too fast kitten as it tried to escape. "I just want to help you, you little shit." While B got to bash in some scumbag's skull, he'd told Jason to patrol the area instead, mostly to keep him away from the action, much to Jason's own disappointment. He did understand why the man did it. Kind of. Yesterday, Jason had almost twisted his ankle, so the B-man decided to be a bit more careful this time around to avoid aggravating the almost injury too much. Tragically, Alfred had even agreed with the man. So Jason really should be grateful to have been allowed to patrol at all. Not that it made his little patrol any less boring. Not at all. Sighing, he ignored the urge to frustratedly kick the nearest rock. He didn't want to scare the litter of abandoned kittens off, after all. That would be majorly counterproductive to what he'd been desperately trying to achieve for the past hour now. He was Robin, for goodness sake. He was great with victims, good with kids, but he couldn't catch 3 goddamn kittens to bring them to a shelter? Jason took a deep breath and carefully approached the little runaway again, but before he could grab it, it fled, causing him to groan in misery. "You should try and get them to come to you with some treats instead of hunting them down, kitten," a female voice suddenly said from above. Whirling around, he saw Catwoman perched on the edge of the rooftop, looking down at him and the cats. Great. "I don't fucking have cat food in my pockets, lady," Jason snarked back. Not because he disliked Selena. Nah, she was cool. But because she was, A, constantly cadoodling with Bruce when they saw each other on patrol, which was embarrassing and disgusting. And B, because he was very frustrated at this point. Okay? With a whoosh, Selena gently landed next to him and said, "Luckily for you, I do," before handing out a small pouch with cat treats. With a muttered thanks, he snatched the pouch out of her hands and started to approach the kittens, before freezing. She said not to do that. With a confused expression, Jason looked back at Selena, who was now leaning against the wall, casually watching. "Take your glove off, kitten, and put some treats into the palm of your hand. Then crouch down with your arm outstretched, so that they don't have to come too near. They'll approach you by themselves, although it could take a few minutes." Her voice was oddly gentle and encouraging, as was her faint smile. Biting his lip, Jason followed her instructions, trying to make himself look as small as possible, hand-holding the food. It did take around 5 minutes for the first little rascal to approach, but once one did, the others soon followed suit, eagerly eating out of the palm of his hand. It was so precious, Jason couldn't wipe the smile off his face, even if he tried. When he looked back at Selena, excitedly, he was greeted with a big grin on her face, and a soft look in her eyes. "Good job, Robin. Now, the easiest way to get them into the box you found is to put it on its side and place some of the treats in it, so that they can wander in themselves, okay? Be careful with moving the box, though. You don't want to scare them off now." With his brows furrowed in concentration, Jason slowly and almost silently placed the cardboard box near the kittens, using his free, gloved hand. Then he guided the kittens towards the box using his treat-filled one, before dropping some food into it. Just as Selena had said, the little furballs flocked towards the box, allowing Jason to gently turn it so that the opening was facing upwards, just before any of them decided to play Houdini again. "I got you now, you little shits," Jason grinned, standing up with the box filled with 3 little kittens, and immediately turning towards Selena, as if to show his accomplishment off like a proud child. Humming, the cat-themed burglar stepped towards him, peering at the kittens before speaking up. I'd estimate them being around 10 to 12 weeks old at most. If it's okay with you, I'd like to take them to my apartment to clean them up. I'll take them to the vet at a more holy hour in the morning, instead of handing her the box, because who else could look after a litter of kittens better than Catwoman? Jason took a step back and held it closer to his chest. He was pretty sure he was scowling at the woman. Selena snorted. You're welcome to join and help me, kitten. Although, I don't think Bat would let you keep them. Shut up, was his automatic response, before pausing and really registering what had been said, and sheepishly adding, yes, please. It wasn't as if he had anything better to do anyway, nor had Robin been particularly needed. Please do send the Bat a text of your whereabouts, then. I'd hate for him to cause a ruckus again and disturb my neighbors. Done. Jason shot back without hesitation. The trip to Selena's apartment was short and sweet, as the woman led Jason and the kittens in through the window. He already knew its location, because B was not as slick as he thought, but this was the first time he'd been inside the place. They entered through the living room, which was modern yet cozy, and filled with cats sleeping, and now waking up, everywhere. As Selena went to turn on some lights and close the curtains, Jason knelt on the ground and gently placed the box down. The second the first meow came from one of the little rascals, about a dozen grown cats rushed towards them. With a shout of surprise, Jason jumped up and staggered back. Damn it, he should have known that Catwoman would have multiple cats. Stupid. Frowning, he tried to calm his racing heart, when Selena practically snuck up on him with a laugh. Is Boy Wonder scared of cats? Jason's frown twisted into a scowl. No, I just got a healthy respect, that's all. He answered stubbornly. So Kitten has had his eyes scratched out before, huh? Selena snorted. Don't worry, though. These are nice as long as you don't annoy them. Just let them come to you. He looked at the woman for a few seconds, before nodding tersely and sitting down on the carpeted floor, next to the cats, who'd lifted the kittens out of their box in the meantime and dutifully started grooming them. Selena, on the other hand, disappeared behind a corner, presumably into the kitchen, only to come back minutes later carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. With a grateful, thanks, Jason took a sip and looked at the cat-themed thief in astonishment. This is just like Alfie makes it. Selena laughed. Well, he was the one who taught me. Jason tilted his head in question, prompting her to sit down on the couch across from where he was lounging on the floor. Cats elegantly pranced around and over him, and started to explain, with a small smile gracing her face. This was before you were even in the picture. Bat took me out on a date, and your brother's feathers were so ruffled by it that he fled to one of his friends for the night. Without telling Daddy Bats, of course. Instead of sleeping, he was up all night looking for Dick, and then, subsequently, fought with him until sunrise. It wasn't pretty. At some point, Alfred pulled me aside, told me I could use something comforting, and a little distraction. Yeah, that sounds like Alfie. He is amazing. He is, Selena quietly agreed. They sat like that in silence for a while, sipping their respective teas, chatting here and there, and petting the cats that wandered into their laps. It was comforting, and reminded Jason of his mom and the afternoons they spent together when she wasn't all doped up. Just the 2 of them, soaking up the comfort of each other's presence, and enjoying being near one another. Jason swallowed thickly. The silence was broken by Selena. I'll go wash the kittens, but I think the kitten in front of me should take a shower as well. She hummed. I'll show you to the bathroom and put out some old clothes of mine for you. If you're fine with wearing girl clothes, that is. The last sentence came out in a teasing tone. Jason couldn't help himself and barked out a laugh before swiftly letting her know that it didn't bother him. Secretly, it did quite the opposite, a warm feeling spreading through him. The shower was a warm welcome as he washed all of Gotham's grime off him, before putting on the sweatpants and shirt Selena had put out for him. Knowing that he was currently wearing her clothes, even if it wasn't visible to the naked eye, made him feel woozy and warm. as Jason padded out of the bathroom and towards the kitchen, where he heard water running, and Selena murmuring to some very unhappy kittens, he was struck by how domestic this all was. For all the woman's faults, her disgusting relationship with his mentor, and her thievery, she would be a good mother figure, it struck him suddenly. Jason quickly abandoned that thought as Selena spotted him, causing his ears to tint red in embarrassment. Stepping up next to the woman, he seamlessly helped her dry the kittens off. "Thank you, Jason," she said, simply. After a while, he opened his mouth. "Do they already have names?" "Not yet, no. Any ideas, kitten?" He hummed and thought before answering after a beat. "This one's Puck," he said, pointing to the kitten currently trying to escape the towel, because he's the little shit that kept running away. Then he pointed to the one almost asleep, curled up in the towel, and said, "This one's Aurora, because she is sleeping constantly. And the one I have—" He paused, looking down at the last little rascal. "He is called Darcy." Selena nodded before smiling. "They're good names, little literature nerd. Don't worry, I used to devour those books too." Jason smiled before a yawn forced its way out of his mouth. "I think it's time for this kitten to go to bed. You can have my bed," the woman said, interrupting him effortlessly before he could even object. Nah, you're going to get some rest until Bruce comes to pick you up." He looked at her resolute face for a few more seconds before slumping and nodding. "Fine," Jason grumbled with a petulant pout, causing the woman next to him to laugh before herding him towards her room. Almost as if they'd been doing this for years, Selena drew the curtains as Jason climbed into her bed. Without missing a beat, she almost lovingly tucked him in, before walking towards the door and shutting off the lights. "Good night, kitten," she smiled. "Good night, Mama Cat," Jason teased, without hesitation. A faint smile appeared on the woman's face. "Could you leave the door open a bit?" Nodding, Selena answered, "Of course," before vanishing down the hallway towards the light shining from the living room. It didn't take more than 5 minutes for Jason to be asleep, only occasionally hearing rustling from various cats joining him in bed, and then, a good while later, murmurs. His mind whispered to him that Bea had arrived, as he picked up bits and pieces of the conversation. "Should have told me. Kitten's safe with me. Selena." Such a worrywart. A good kid. "I know. Thank you." Then he felt himself gently be lifted out of the bed. As he cracked an eye open to see Bruce holding him without his suit on, he relaxed. "It's just me, J-Lad. You can go back to sleep," the man said softly, pulling him closer before ensuring he was comfortable. Without further ado, he obeyed, closing his eyes once more. The last conscious thought that went through Jason's mind was that he would definitely have to come back to visit the kittens. And Selena. Chapter 3. Tim and Pamela Isley. Tim's heart was pumping in his throat as he ran down the street. The Joker's manic cackles were the only thing he could hear, apart from the blood rushing through his ears. Killing one Robin had obviously not been enough for the clown, as he chased Tim down with his lackeys after having lured him into a trap. This had been targeted from the start, with the Joker organizing an enormous hostage situation, with an impersonator present, just in order to catch Tim on his patrol alone. This shouldn't have even worked, were it not for the urgent business coming up for Babs and Dick being on a mission with the Titans. For this to have worked the way it had, the clown must have had serious luck. It made Tim shudder in revolt. "You can't run forever, little birdie. I can see you getting tired." The man, no, monster, chasing him laughed. The fact that this individual had found some kind of twisted pleasure in chasing him already had his hair standing on end, but the fact that he was right, that Tim was slowly getting tired and losing distance, that was the most horrifying part. He couldn't keep this up for much longer, meaning that he needed to find a place to hide ASAP, unless he wanted to be the next Robin whose wings would be clipped by the clown. No, he couldn't think this negatively. Jason wouldn't have. Jason would have been strong. So Tim had to be as well. He had to survive. Bruce still needed him. At this point, he needed to do everything to carry on Jason's legacy. He needed to continue visiting the street kids in Crime Alley. He needed to protect the working people. He needed to remind everyone of the boy wonder who had so much compassion that it killed him. Tim bit back a sob as he almost tripped and fell. He would not fail. Looking up ahead, he got an idea. His only one. Robinson Park had been off limits for him for years now. Walking into it could serve as a death sentence, depending on Poison Ivy and her children's moods. And yet, there had been quiet rumors of Ivy protecting kids in danger once they fled into her territory. Technically, Tim was a kid, as much as he hated it. The plan was far from foolproof, and the risk of Ivy deciding that he deserved her ire being high, but it was worth a try. This way, he would, at least, have a chance. Something he definitely would not have if the Joker got his fingers on him. Adjusting his course, Tim ran full speed towards the entrance of Robinson Park right ahead. The second the Joker understood what he was planning, the joking and cackling gained an enraged undertone. "Oh, you insolent brat! Trying to flee from Uncle Jay, are you?" The shout had Tim shudder in fear, the tears filling his eyes in sheer desperation. All of that was nothing in comparison to the scream of rage that left the monster's lips when Tim finally stepped through the entrance of Robinson Park, free from the Joker's potential clutches. With a racing heart and lungs gasping for air, he carefully crept further into nature, trying his utmost not to step on any plants. After a few minutes, he found a little clearing in which what seemed to be a small garden was kept. With a small sigh of relief, he let himself fall into a little patch of moss, slumping against a tree trunk. Tim had survived. For now. As the adrenaline ebbed away, the reality of how close this call had really been sank in. Tears started to roll down his cheeks. It took him a good few minutes to notice it, thanks to his poorly timed breakdown. Yet, at some point, he noticed a little tendrils of vines creeping closer to him, almost caressing his wet cheek, or gently wrapping around his wrist as if to hold his hand. Tim blinked. "Hi," he rasped out, clearing his voice as he watched the vines and branches coming from the plants surrounding him carefully come closer. Yes, Tim was well aware that fear and flight might have been a more suitable reaction to Ivy's plants touching him, but he was just so tired, and it wasn't as if they were hurting him. They were being really gentle and almost comforting, really. He sat like that for a few minutes, with the vines stroking his cheeks, wiping away his tears, and petting his hands. At some point, they got bolder, tugging off his gloves and retrieving a few bird-rings from his utility belt's pockets. Should Tim have minded that? Yes, probably. But, strangely enough, after everything that had happened, and the stress with his parents and the Joker, he couldn't help but find it amusing. It was as if the vines and branches were little toddlers exploring, and Tim let them with a smile on his face. That was until one vine jokingly started to attack another with one of his bird-rings. With wide eyes, he sprang up, running over. No, bad vine, let go!" Tim shouted in panic. "Don't do that! Those are sharp, you'll hurt each other." Almost comically, both vines involved turned towards him, almost cocking their heads, if they had them. Taking a deep breath, Tim spoke up again. "Drop the bird-rings, please. Those will hurt you if you aren't careful." When the vines only continued to practically stare at him, he sighed and slipped a bird-ring out of his pocket and cut the tip of one of his fingers with it. The cut was small and shallow, but enough to have a few drops of blood form, getting the point across. "See? Hurts." That had the vine dropping the sharp object, as another branch immediately bound itself around his injured finger, seemingly fussing. "Interesting." A sharp, female voice cut through the air, causing Tim to violently flinch. Ivy. Whirling around, careful not to hurt any of the plants still curled around him, he saw the rogue leaning against a tree, petting a patch of flowers on it. "Dr. Isley, ma'am, I didn't mean to, for them, Tim stuttered, eloquently. "No need for explanations or apologies, little sprout." Ivy cut him off smoothly. "I have been here for far longer than you have been aware. I saw what happened with my own eyes. In addition to what my children are telling me, you did nothing wrong." Tim unfroze just enough to give the woman a stilted nod. Ivy seemingly didn't mind, as she strode further into the clearing and towards him, only to bend over and pick up the birdie the vine had dropped. With a hum, she examined its sharp edge before handing it back to him without comment. With a shaky hand, he took the weapon and swiftly stowed it away. When he looked back at the woman in front of him, Ivy had held out her hand, his brows furrowed, as Tim's eyes met hers, his confusion clear. "Your finger. Show it to me," she huffed, as if it had been oh so clear from the start what she wanted from him. Maybe it had been, and his brain had just not caught up yet. That, or he was just being very stupid. But before he could delve further into these thoughts, Ivy cleared her throat, with flashing eyes, causing Tim to quickly place his finger into her palm, facing up. Once more, the woman hummed, and pulled out a little glass vial full of some kind of ointment out of literally nowhere. Tim's voice was stuck in his throat, as she put a few drops on his cut, expecting it to hurt, or have some other very unwanted effect. Much to his surprise, the ointment merely formed a protective layer over his cut, dulling the stings it occasionally gave off. His eyes found hers, filled to the brim with intrigue. "How does this work? What is it made of? Does it also help with bigger wounds? How long does this last?" Tim mindlessly rattled off any question that came to mind, only stopping when an unexpected laugh came out of Ivy's mouth. "Dr. Isley?" He hesitated, not knowing what to make of the situation. Suddenly, Ivy's hand came down on his shoulder, as she started to steer him further into the heart of her territory. "No need to fear, little sprout. You only remind me a lot of myself back when—" She paused, her gaze almost sad. "Back when I was still a scientist." As they walked through the narrow pathway, through the thick barriers of nature, he quietly responded, voice hesitant, not wanting to step on the woman's toes. "You still are a scientist, ma'am. I'm sure your more recent findings would be highly interesting to more people than just me." That had the woman next to him freeze, just as a little nature-made home came into view. Tim himself blue-screened, fearing he might have majorly overstepped. Stupid. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be insensitive, Dr. Isley. I've just been analyzing your pollens and such a bunch to figure out the chemical side of them. I won't leak anything, or... Shh." A finger connected with his lips, effectively and gently shushing him. "I wasn't upset, seedling. Just surprised. I was not aware that you would have been interested in my work," Ivy said, almost softly. Tim's eyes widened before he quickly nodded, excitedly speaking up again as soon as Ivy retracted her finger. "I've read all of it. So many of your ideas could revolutionize the city. Maybe even the world. I particularly love your idea of using plants to clean our water resources. It was so good that I wrote an essay about it last year for my chemistry class. I could show it to you sometime, if you'd like, Dr. Isley." His question at the end was tentative, hopeful yet still scared of rejection. "Aunt Pam," the woman simply answered, the smile on her face genuine. Looking at the rogue in surprise, he asked, filled with confusion, "What?" Ivy only clicked her tongue, with almost fond disapproval. "It's Aunt Pam to you, little sprout." He blinked, and blinked again, before slowly nodding. "All right, Aunt Pam?" She gave a nod of approval, before herding him towards an empty patch of soil right next to a few potted plants. "You will help me get my newest children comfortable in their new homes, little seedling. And, in the meantime, I am open to answer any question regarding my work which you have. All right." They did exactly that for the next hour, with Tim thoroughly enjoying himself, chatting with Ivy, Aunt Pam, while helping her plant. So much so that he was almost disappointed once they were done. Standing up, Tim dusted himself off with a grin, ready to ask what they'd do next, only for Aunt Pam to tell him that it was time for him to leave. Seeing his sad and disappointed face, she laughed and shushed him. "Oh, don't look at me like that, little sprout. My children are telling me that your mentor has arrived and is nervously pacing in front of my home's entrance. I don't think it would end well for him if he were to be kept waiting, and come in here to get you himself." For a second, the last part had Tim confused. The plants hadn't done anything to him after all. Apparently, he'd said it out loud, since Ivy sighed and explained. While I do usually shield children from the harm that they could come across in Gotham streets, you, Robin, are special. Tim's heart skipped a beat at the woman's words. He was special? With almost sparkling eyes, he listened to her go on. I admit, I was intrigued when you came into my park. Undecided about what to do with you yet. But then you interacted so well with my children and showed respect to me, which I hadn't experienced in years, not even from your predecessors. My little sprout, my children can feel the sorrow and burden that you carry with you. That combined with what you have just shown me this evening, your kind nature, has caused me to grow fond of you. Ivy paused for a second before continuing. Now, even with how much I would enjoy spending more time with you, you must go now. The handful of idiotic henchmen that clown sent after you will not pose any danger to you any more. Go back to the Batman and rest, all right? I expect you to be back here this time next week, and do bring that essay of yours, little sprout. It took him a minute of just standing there, mentally running through everything the woman had just said, making sure he wasn't dreaming this up, before he threw himself at her, his arms circling her waist, pressing his face into her abdomen. Thank you, Aunt Pam, he whispered with a shuddery breath. After a second, Ivy's hand came to rest on the crown of his head, while the other hugged him close. You're welcome, my little sprout. I'll see you soon. Pulling away, Tim nodded, bidding his own goodbye, promising to come back and to bring his essay, before quickly running back to where he came from. Back to Bruce. He couldn't wait to visit his aunt again next week, and the week after that, and the one after that. This was amazing. Chapter 4. Damien and Edward Nigma. Damien was slowly but surely regretting making this childish bet with Timothy. As much as he treasured his newfound allegiance with the elder, the way he had now taken to treating Damien was unexpected. Particularly, at least, he had anticipated Timothy to be more hesitant spending time with him, maybe even patrolling with him, should their schedules align. He had also hoped for the other to join him in making sure Todd knew how ridiculous he could be, and help him ward off Grayson's, no, first names, he promised Timothy, Richard's octopus limbs. Damien would very much like for his lungs to retain their oxygen levels. Thank you very much. But alas, he had been wrong. Of course, Timothy, being the superior brother and ally he was, did take part in what Damien had originally planned for them to use this bond for. But first and foremost, he started to baby him, of all people. That week had been abhorrent, and Damien wished he were able to forget it. Now, a few weeks later, Timothy had dialed that insanity back down, only to start teasing him more and more. It was a clear sign of his brother growing more comfortable with and around him, which, internally, made him very happy. But this was to be kept a secret, of course. Regretfully, this development had led him to this particular little predicament, in which he was currently stuck. 2 days ago, his brother had found a Reddit post, a pretty nifty site, Damien had to admit, listing the world's hardest codes to crack. In his own youthful faith in his own capabilities, he had told Timothy that it would be nothing but child's play to solve them. He still remembered a twinkle in the elder's eyes as he said that this would be a bet, then. First to solve all, with aid being allowed by everybody Richard and Todd. Jason hadn't put on their blacklist. This, however, did not leave many people Damien knew, and so he, for the first time in a while, had probably fucked up, as Jason would oh so eloquently put it, especially seeing as the loser would have to patrol in Richard's old suit, the green scaly panty one, for a whole week. As much as he respected the first Robin, Damien would rather impale himself with one of his mother's short swords than go through that embarrassment. No way in hell would he ever touch, let alone wear, that abomination. And that was how he found himself sitting on a bench overlooking Gotham's docks and the ocean. It was a calm night, perfect for him to continue trying to understand where he had gone wrong with the second-to-last code. All of the prior ones had been manageable, but this one had been causing Damien a headache for the past 2 days. Somewhere, he must have made a mistake. But where? Richard had assured him that Timothy wasn't much closer to figuring it out than he was. But that did not put him at rest at all. Quite the opposite. It made Damien panic more. He had started out so strong, building an undeniable lead, but his brother had caught up, and done so fast. While he had been stuck on this one code for almost 52 hours, Timothy had only been working on cracking it for the last 19. The statistics looked bad. As he angrily scribbled on his tablet, crossing off yet another possible way to solve this as unsuccessful, he felt a presence sit down next to him. When he looked up, it wasn't Richard, Father, or even Jason. No, it was the Riddler. The Riddler! Mentally, he scolded himself for foolishly leaving his guard down. Damien should have been paying more attention to his surroundings. He knew better, after all. Back in the league, this failure would have cost him his head. "Oh, the Dorabella cipher. It's been a while since I've seen that one." A quiet voice interrupted his thoughts. With a distrusting eye, Damien glanced over at the rogue sitting next to him. The Riddler seemed completely at ease sitting next to Robin, who, in all cases, should be carting him back off to Arkham. But the man next to him took his silence as an invitation to keep speaking. English composer Edward Elgar sent this to his friend Dorabella in the 19th century. It looks short and sweet, but it's almost impossible to crack. Or so they say, at least. Before Damien could tell the rogue to put his hands up and to yield to justice, he paused. "What do you mean by that?" Nigma turned to look at him. "What do you mean by the last part?" "Oh, that!" The man smiled. "I solved it a few years ago. Prison is very boring, you know." Damien's eyes widened a fraction. Nigma had solved it? So he could help him? Like a shark finally tasting blood for the first time, Damien shot out his next question. "Are you still in possession of the recollection of how you did it?" The Riddler laughed. "Riddle me this, Robin. I see. I store in perfect frame what others lose. I still can name. What am I?" With eyebrows furrowed in concentration, Damien mentally ran through the riddle again, trying to find a connection to what they were talking about. Or rather, what he'd just asked the rogue. Suddenly, he had it. Eidetic memory. You have eidetic memory. So you still remember how you did it, he stated. "Good job, Robin," Riddler easily praised, surprising Damien before going on. "If you want to, I can help you, but..." After a second of silence, Damien slowly asked, "But? You must do me one favor, Robin." Damien nodded in response, waiting to hear the price of the man's aid, very much aware that it would likely not be worth it, even if his reputation was on the line. "You must call me Edward. No Riddler, criminal, or Nigma. Understood?" That was it? He didn't state out loud, of course, but did in the privacy of his thoughts, debate over the possibility of this potentially being a trap. A rather lackluster one at that. In the end, calling the man Edward, as requested, would not hurt Damien in the long or short run. As far as he could think, it might even lead to a beneficial alliance, even with the other party being a criminal. "As you wish, Edward," Damien spoke, before tilting his tablet in such a way so his new ally could come to his aid. Edward dutifully went through what Damien had worked out until now. Every time, yes, every single time, he had something right, the man would make sure to praise him verbally, causing Damien's cheeks to flush. It wasn't as if his father, Pennyworth, or any of his brothers never did it, because they did, some louder and more frequently than others, but he still couldn't help but soak up Edward's praise like a dried-up sponge. Just as if he were a goddamn child. Which he wasn't, even if his Aki, Todd, just adored to say otherwise. The next hour passed in a flash. Edward could have very well just given him the answer and called it a day. Or rather, a night, in their case. But instead, he took the time to explain Damien's mistakes and help him understand the next steps. Damien had to admit that this was turning out to be quite entertaining. In sum, it took them 2.5 hours to solve the cipher. After that, they relocated to a small, 24-hour cafe and started working on the last code. Damien offered to pay for whatever Edward desired from the cafe, yet the man himself declined harshly and insisted that he pay for both of them, an unnecessary but ultimately kind gesture. It must have looked strange to find Robin bent over a table, furiously noting down whatever the rogue next to him was saying, while scribbling on a napkin himself. His katana was leaning against the table, and he used one of his bird-rings to keep some of the many scribbled-on napkins from flying off the table every time a person entered the cafe. Slowly but surely, the last code started to come together beautifully. The tension in Damien's shoulders started to dissolve, and he started to loosen up here and there, engaging in casual conversation with Edward. Not small talk, though. He despised small talk. Edward talked about his childhood cat, Puzzle, causing Damien to slowly open up about his beloved pets, Titus and Alfred. The man in front of him listened to every word, even going so far as to ask for pictures, which he showed, albeit a little reluctantly. His pets were his everything. Whereas he did enjoy showing people his art, he preferred to keep his pets to himself and his family and friends. It took him 2 months alone to feel comfortable enough to introduce them to Superboy. Finally, they had to solve the last code, and their following cry of excitement had all the half-asleep people in the cafe turn their heads towards them with a scornful look. Damien could not care less, though he had officially bested Timothy, and he would not waste a second of time to let the elder know. Turning on his comm, he immediately pulled his brother into a private call line. "Robin, do you need something?" The echo in the background told Damien that Timothy was in the cave, probably on monitor duty. Good. That way he could drop the bomb, as Richard would say, without risking the chance of Timothy being distracted on patrol and injuring himself. "I have solved the penultimate and ultimate codes," read Robin. "You must now admit defeat and accept the beforehand decided punishment," he said, careful to use code names, but unable to wipe the triumphant grin off his face. There was a deafening silence on the other end, until Timothy croaked out, "What? How?" in complete and utter shock. "My skills are obviously superior. Just accept it." Damien grinned. "Who helped you? It couldn't have been—" "Shh, Timothy," he interrupted the other smoothly. "You wouldn't guess it. But don't fret, I did not receive any aid from people on Richard and Aki's blacklist." The sigh could be heard from the other end of the line. "I shall send all of my notes and solutions to Oracle, in addition to the identity of the person who came to my aid." "Then congratulations are in order, I guess," Timothy grumbled. "Good job, baby bat. I'll see you back in the Batcave shortly." "Yes, thank you. Robin out." Edward, who, interestingly enough, was just sitting as he had been, and smiling at him. "I enjoyed our little code session, Robin. Thank you for letting me teach you," the rogue told him earnestly. Damien nodded before answering. "Thank you for offering your alliance to me. I'm sure that further co-working efforts would be mutually beneficial." "Of course." Edward held out a slip of paper towards him. "I think it's best for you to go now, lest you wish to alarm your family. But here are my contact details if you wish to reach me without needing to track me down or hack into my personal devices." With a grateful nod and a kind wish for a good night, Damien exited the cafe, more content than he'd been in a while. The pictures of Timothy, which he got out of this, were worth all the pain and effort. The tentative friendship with Nigma, though, was worth a lot more. They had already made a new appointment to solve some other ciphers and riddles together. Chapter 5. As Jason sat at the kitchen table with his brothers on a fine afternoon, he had to breathe in for the 20th time in an effort not to explode on Dick. Why? Because the oldest had somehow blackmailed them all into playing Ludo. Not Monopoly. Never Monopoly. In an attempt at some sibling bonding, or so the dickhead himself said. For as well as Damien and Timbit had been getting along, both were very much about to kill each other by the time they had only been playing for a few minutes. Dick, the bastard he was just sitting there, tutting periodically when the two youngest got particularly violent. This was such a waste of time. Jason had so many things to do, like helping Selena with her newest kittens. She had recently moved apartments, too, meaning he'd be much better appreciated there, helping to assemble cat trees and other furniture. Not that Selena was incapable of doing so herself, of course. No, he would never dare to suggest that. Jason merely enjoyed being helpful, without some weird sticky strings attached, or someone looking at him as if he were a fucking ghost. Yes, Bruce, he was talking to you. In short, he was going to need to find a way to escape before the whole situation escalated. Preferably. Timothy, how could you? Damien suddenly screeched, like the little demon he was. Timbo's response was just as emotional as he snapped back. Yes, because I definitely control what number the dice lands on. Sighing, Jason fished his phone out of his pocket, just to pause at the latest messages. Selena. Before he could even open and read what she had sent, Tim's phone started ringing. Said phone had been laying on the table face up, meaning that they all got a nice view of the caller's ID. Aunt Pam? Timmers didn't have any living relatives beyond his damned family. Jason was very certain of that. So who the fuck was Aunt Pam? More importantly, why did his little brother literally snatch his own phone away and practically flee out of the room to take the call in apparent secrecy? Sure, all four of them were reasonably fond, obsessed with their privacy, but it wasn't unusual for them to take their calls wherever they currently were, regardless of who was in the room, only walking away if their call turned out to be long-winded or in need of a tiny bit of discretion. This all led to Jason asking himself one single question. Who the fuck was this Aunt Pam person, and why was Timberly keeping her secret? One look over at his big brother made it clear that Dick was asking the exact same question at the moment. Yet before any of them could speak, Damien's phone vibrated, and he too left the room in a hurry to pick up. What the? Dick started to ask, just as his phone also went off. With disbelieving eyes, Jason watched as his brother gave him an apologetic look, mouthing, "Sorry, little wing, gotta go," before, just like the other two traitors, leaving the room. What the fuck? Shaking his head, Jason looked down at his own phone again. Selena having now spammed more messages, obviously needing his attention. Before reading any of them, he pressed call. Better to talk than to waste a lifetime trying to read and answer everything by typing. "Hey, Mama Cat, what's up?" He hummed into the speaker, almost on automatic. "You haven't read my messages, then," she concluded. "Can you come to Robinson Park, please? More specifically, the abandoned store next to it." Jason paused in confusion before answering. "Sure. What are we doing there? Is there a body I need to hide?" Selena laughed. No. Don't worry, Jay. Nothing like that. Remember when I told you about Harley's birthday present? Yeah. Yes, well, the furniture came in late, and we had some last-minute changes. Could you come over to help us with setting everything up? The others are also calling for help as we speak. His brows furrowed. Who's the others? The woman on the other end of the phone snorted. The other rogues, kitten. Ivy's here to help, and so are Dent and Nigma. Oh, he kind of forgotten that. Whoops. I'll be there in a few, Mama Cat. Jason spoke, making his way down to the cave to suit up. Thanks, kitten. See you in a bit. Guess Timmy and Damie would have to carry on playing without him, and Dick once they both got back from their calls. Jason got to the building Selena had meant quickly enough, while it was dilapidated enough for the city to abandon it, especially considering it's located right next to Ivy's territory. The old store was still very much in a condition that would put some crime alley residency buildings to shame. It was obvious to the naked eye that people had been working on it. Its outside had been freshly painted, sidewalk next to it being clean and devoid of any trash, and a brand new sign on the front door. Dr. Quinn Therapy Center. Harley had really come a long way since she broke up with the Joker right after Jason's death. That had been the wake-up call she had needed. The catalyst for her turning her life around, as much as it was possible now that she was. She was still very much a wanted person, often having the great pleasure of staying in Arkham for a few days before gleefully breaking out of the hellhole. but even B-Man had to admit that Harley Quinn, when left alone, was not a threat anymore. While she would occasionally go on heists with the other two sirens, Selena and Poison Ivy, no innocents would ever be harmed, children least of all. Rather, they would target the filthy rich, and usually nauseatingly corrupt, making them pay by theft, property damage, or some roughing up, with murder only being the very last resort. Yeah, this would be the perfect birthday present. One she truly, truly deserved, even though there would still be some residues of awkwardness between the two of them. Jason had bonded a lot with Harley over their shared experiences. By now, he would even go so far as to refer to the woman as his aunt, with their bi-weekly therapy sessions being highly important, yet also fun. Pulling off his helmet, leaving him with his domino only, Jason made his way inside. "Hey guys. Hi, Mama Cat. Red Robin?" He froze, blinking at the person currently helping Poison fucking Ivy pot some plants. What the fuck was the baby bird doing here? Tim, the person very much in question, also froze, with a wide-eyed look on his face. Hood? Aunt Pam, Poison Ivy, Dr. Pamela Isley. Oh, fuck no. Since when? Jason sighed in disbelief. How in the world had one of the most dangerous women in Gotham turned into his little brother's aunt? When the fuck did that even happen? Timberly sent him an apologetic smile. 5 months after becoming Robin, the boy practically squeaked out. Does anybody know? Shaking his head, Tim immediately started pleading frantically. Hood, please, don't tell B. He would ground me until I turn 50. Jason ran a hand through his hair. Jesus. To be fair, you never told me that Catwoman is practically your mom. Although, I did kind of figure it out. Sorry. Of course you did, little bat stalker. As retaliation for the whole mess of the situation, Jason pulled the little brat into his chest and gave him a good old noogie, making Timmy shriek. This turned, of course, into a mini brawl with Jason himself clearly winning. That was until Selena cleared her throat. Letting go of his little brother, Jason took a step back and surveyed the room. In the main entrance/waiting room, it was just him, Timmy, Poison Ivy, and Selena, although there was audible rummaging of a person in what would become Harley's office. Speaking of Selena, though, Jason quickly went over to greet the woman, properly with a kiss to the cheek and a hug. I'd almost started worrying that you'd forgotten all your manners, with the amount of time you've spent with the bat, his pseudo-mother said, embracing him warmly. Her comment made Jason chuckle. That was Selena for you. One of the kindest, most protective women he'd ever met, yet simultaneously, also one of the most dangerous. She definitely didn't shy away from putting Jason in his place, no matter their size difference. One time, she'd even scruffed him as if he were a kitten, because Jason had been acting bratty intentionally, foiling one of her lesser important heists. Selena taught him not to do so again, very quickly. Jason's train of thought was halted by Selena speaking up again. Dent is currently painting Harl's future office. He said he'd also call in backup. Nigma is gone to get supplies from the hardware store, and will be back in a few, I hope. You can help me assemble these chairs, she finished, gesturing to the box with chairs for the waiting room. Before Jason could answer, the front door was flung open, and a figure rushed in, loudly proclaiming, Uncle Harv, I'm here! Blinking, and blinking again, Jason froze. Big Wing. Wing? Tim said, at the exact same time, causing Dick to pause and turn towards them with big eyes. Fuck. It was silent for a few seconds, before their big brother went on. Why are you two even here? There are rogues here! They are dangerous! Again, there was a pause, until Jason himself let out a bark of laughter, and Tim Tam, the little rascal, a dry snort, saying, And Uncle Harv isn't? The little shit had a shit-eating grin on his face, one mirroring his own, and stood nonchalantly next to his self-proclaimed Aunt Ivy, full snark. Dick spluttered, clearly not finding any words to throw back at them. Well, but he was already my uncle before the accident. We had history. Jason patted his brother on the back. Yes. Do keep telling yourself that. Does B know? He has his suspicions, but does not need to know more than that. Harvey Dent's voice rang out from the doorway of Harley's office, where he was standing. The man's stance was oddly protective, almost daring them to go snitch. Not that Timmy, or even he, would, regardless of them being in the same boat. The silence that formed after that was swiftly broken by their eldest brother again. Okay, Selena and Hood makes sense-ish. But how in the world did you and Poison Ivy become this close? That's what I was actually asking myself as well. Jason pitched in, turning towards the youngest in their midst. Tim's eyes widened, clearly not expecting both of them to suddenly turn on him. Before he could open his mouth, though, Ivy smoothly stepped in. What is this in your family with being rude, The little sprout sought safety in my territory, and we bonded. We've been spending time together multiple times a week for the past few years. So I trust you both to keep your mouths shut without me having to use outside forces to help you along. Wait, Jason started, a thought just striking him. You were already in cahoots with Double R when you drugged me with your fucking cuddle abomination. Ivy snorted, and Tim looked down at the floor, muttering something inaudible. Speak up for the crowd, baby bird? Dick asked him, with furrowed brows, clearly wanting an answer to soothe his curiosity. I might have complained about your resistance to rebuilding your relationship with B. The little shit said, still quiet, but this time audible. Jason had to take a deep breath to compose himself. His little brother looked at him nervously, obviously anticipating a big, nasty reaction, looking one sentence away from flinching at everybody's movements around him. As if he could ever hurt the kid. You little shit. You're lucky I fucking love you. As Tim wanted to respond, the front door opened yet again. Edward Nigma, the Riddler, stepped inside, carrying bags, obviously back from his trip to the hardware store. That wasn't what had the three ex-Robins shocked, though. It was the voice that was heard behind the rogue. Edward, I expected a harder riddle than that. This one was easy, Damien tutted as he strode inside, also with bags in his hand. The second baby bat noticed them. The room froze. God damn it, not you too! Tim cried out as Tim's brain visibly stopped working. Jason just shook his head to himself before speaking up. Well, this does explain why Robin won the code contest. The Riddler was very much not on our blacklist. That had Tim's brain reboot and start up again as he practically tackled Damien. Obviously, still embarrassed about having to carry out the punishment that came with losing. Come on, kitten, let's go decorate Harley's office. Selena pulled him out of his thoughts. His sight still fixed on Damien and Tim brawling, with Dick trying to get them away from each other. He nodded, following her lead. Good call, Mama Cat. Bruce would not survive the heart attack he'd get if he ever found out. Guess this would turn into another Robin secret. Bruce did find out, and was entirely unamused. Harley loved her birthday present, and the party they threw her, though. Even B showed up. Notes. If you enjoyed this work, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Come hang out with me on Tumblr, and thank you so much for reading, and have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed this story, you can go down to the description below and follow the link to the author's original work. You can leave them many comments and kudos. If you enjoyed my reading, you can subscribe. Or, tell me what else I should read in the comments below. I'll talk to the author and see if they're cool with it. Thank you for listening. God, it's every fic now. Every fic I have to say the word daddy. Apparently, my upstairs neighbors are taking a shower or something. It's fucking 4 p.m.? Who takes a shower at 4 p.m.? He has his suspicions